start with a lawyer where you know you're going to get the ethical, fully analyzed version, and then consider whether or not that lawyer is the one who actually does the registration, because there are other options, and we recommend those other options regularly. But go through the analysis with someone really reputable and knowledgeable, hopefully.
You're listening to the Nonprofit Counsel Podcast with host May Harris.
Okay, today on Nonprofit Counsel Podcast, I am pleased to have Danika Mendrygal, who is the founder and CEO of Mendrygal Law, a boutique law firm that serves nonprofit organizations in Dallas, headquartered in Dallas, but serves all of Texas. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks,
Danika.
May. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you really got into advising nonprofit organizations. You know, I speak with most of my clients and my guests on Nonprofit Counsel. It's kind of a unique niche, and we all have a unique way that we got here. Tell us about how you got here.
You're so right. I mean, I can't remember the last time I spoke with someone in our industry that started off intending to start here, right? So I actually started here in Dallas at a big law firm working in a private client group. And like every high net worth private client group, we dealt with private foundations and some charitable structures. When I was a baby lawyer there, I was the only associate. So I was the one that got all the partner pet bono projects, all the firm pro bono projects. And it's really funny to remember, because the word that I always use to describe it is saddled. I was so unhappy with that version because all I needed was billable hours at that phase of my life. And it was so hard. But what happened was it was 20 years ago when the entire sector was changing. So the IRS was talking about things like governance, and they were changing forms, and the world was sort of turning upside down from the perspective of the nonprofit sector and how the IRS managed. So what that did was, after spending about 12 years at my firm, I was the exempt organizations person there. So all of those pet pro bono projects that I was so not pleased with in the beginning turned out to be a really great jumping off point.
Right. And so fast forward, you left Big Law and you started your own firm. What does that look like for you?
A big snowball, as you well know, probably from your experience.
Yes.
No, it's been so much fun. So I started thinking, I'll just have a sweet little solo practice, and I want sophisticated work, and maybe someday I'll hire a paralegal. Now there's 10 of us, and we're just really sort of blowing and going. It's a group of all women at this point. Because the women, and you'll appreciate this, when I ended up with the moments of, holy cow, how will I get this work done? Who can help me? Who knows the substantive knowledge and who can help me push this forward? I reached out to the people I know, and a lot of those were women who had left the practice of law at big law firms and couldn't quite figure out how to make all the things work. And we figured it out. So now we've got this really great team of former big law women working for the most incredible clients. So it's pretty cool how we ended up here, even if it's inadvertently. And it's fascinating because it's not unlike, we've talked before, it's not unlike your process and how you ended up where you're at with the firm, which is so interesting to me.
It's very aligned. And you find that people in our profession, so really smart attorneys doing some really complicated stuff, when they're asked to just do the same thing day in, day out for the same corporate client, or they don't even get to talk to the clients, they get burned out really fast. And they have all the pressures and obstacles and weights of, being a wife and a mom and have kids and everything else, which really isn't all that conducive, I know, to big law. So having this kind of a structure, and I'm so in awe of your firm, to have, the expertise that our clients need, that nonprofit organizations need. And gosh, there's such a need out there. That's why you now have 10 people and I have a little bit more than that, but a lot of people. But the benefit of that is that we get to be a piece of some pretty amazing things with our clients. We get to experience advising an organization that's really going head on against homelessness, or really head on, to help autism mamas. It's just things like that are so exciting. It keeps bringing me back.
It is. I mean, I affectionately call it the halo effect. I mean, we're just doing our job, right? I'm drafting bylaws and advising on tax law and talking about fundraising. I'm doing all of those technical, substantive things, just like you are. But the people we get to work with are so incredible, and in so many different diverse ways. They're, from every walk, every version, even the ones that are maybe less passionate and less incredible are still doing incredible things with these philanthropic funds. So no, there is an absolute, I think, again, halo effect that comes with working in this area where we're just sort of soaking up these incredible things that these incredibly passionate people are carrying out. So it's fun to be a small part of that.
I couldn't agree more. So one way that we work together, and I'm sure both of us work with other exempt orgs, attorneys, and law firms around the country, is in one way that we work a lot together, you and I, and for-purpose law and Mendrygal Law, is when nonprofit organizations set up a while ago, and they kind of decide they need to move. And it used to be, I think it was pre-2018, wasn't it? You had to go and get a whole new federal determination letter if you moved states, which was just ridiculous. So the IRS finally came out with guidance about how you can do it. And so, you being in Texas and for-purpose law being headquartered in California, I've noticed a lot of mostly California to Texas.
I was debating if I was going to say that because I didn't want to sound, skewed there. But yes, there's always been. I mean, the history of my career, even dating back to pre-nonprofit, there's always been so many connections between the two states. But yes, in the last 5 years, I mean, since, kind of pre-COVID and immediately after, I mean, it's been wild. Just kind of exponentially growing.
Absolutely. And so whenever I get a California client that wants to move to Texas, my next call is to Danika, and we've had a couple in the other direction. And, it's not as complex as you might think, but it is. There's a lot of little hoops you have to go through. And we're not going to get into the nitty gritty of it here, but it definitely differs by state. Depends on how your state, if it plays well with other states.
And it's not always an option. I mean, there are some states where it's super easy, some where it's doable, but with hoops, right? And then others where it's really not conducive at all. And so every time I know we see it, it's sort of a case-by-case scenario, working with local counsels such as yourself of, okay, what's the other state? California, great, we're going to call May. And sort of walking through the process. But you're right. It's not like a lot of things in our area. It's not rocket science, but you do have to walk through the steps and the process to get from point A to point B.
Right. And you have to work with someone who's knowledgeable about the IRS and exempt orgs, because the procedure for a nonprofit to do it is completely different than the procedure to do it for just a normal business.
It is. Absolutely.
Completely different.
Absolutely. And I think it parrots, not to rabbit trail us here, but it parrots probably the other area where we work with y'all the most. I'm showing my Texas there, which is,
I was about to say that.
But, we see so many organizations. I mean, we probably like you, we have a nationwide tax practice. Our state governance practice, of course, is focused in Texas. And we have a lot of clients who have, operations either nationwide or in a handful of states. And lo and behold, California is one of the ones we see most often. So we see that too. And it's from the same perspective of, my paralegal might know well how to technically register to do business and jump through the technical hoops. But I don't know the ins and outs of California charitable solicitation, all of the compliance hoops, everything that is unique to the California arena for nonprofits. And that's the case in every state. And so to your point, we as the experts always want our corresponding experts who know deeply the ins and outs of what state law we're dealing with. It's such a unique area, I think, unique aspect of our area.
It's incredibly unique and really fascinating, and I think is really easy to do poorly.
Yes.
So
yes.
I'm going to digress a little bit. We really didn't. Yes, we've seen it. I have had a slew recently of, organizations that really don't operate nationwide, but they got to a point where they're like, oh, we talked to this service, which shall remain nameless, and they told us we had to register to solicit in all the states. And so I've had like 5 of them recently.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Exactly.
I've not run into that one yet, but that.
And in 2 of them, we're in the process of winding them back. So it's like we have to do an analysis of where are you really fundraising, right? Where are you really transacting business? And then do the whole thing about withdrawal, because you can't just leave and not do it. Then you have to withdraw.
Well, and it's fascinating too, because when you start to register to solicit, you're also subjecting yourself in most cases to jurisdiction in that state. And so that's a whole other ballgame, whether it be lawsuits and liability or sales tax or goodness knows what else. So, I mean, I'm telling you what you already know, but it's such a good.
Yes, but our listeners don't.
And maybe they're going to wish they never heard this right now. But no, it's such a bugaboo for organizations who haven't stepped into that yet. But it's boggling my mind just a little bit, the scenario that you just described, which is being thrown into it, maybe unwarrantedly so, and then having to withdraw. That's even worse. So I'm sorry to hear that.
Because it's not cheap.
No.
So, when with one that I'm working with right now, I'm like, how much did they charge you to do this? And it was upwards of $80,000 to register in all of these states. And I'd say maybe 2 of them were necessary, 2.
Wow.
Which is just mind blowing. So yeah, I think there's some predatory organizations out there.
Well, and I don't know if this is what we're supposed to be talking about today. So I don't want to rabbit trail.
We can talk about whatever we want.
Great.
That's
we can make it up as we go along. No, but it's fascinating because you want to talk about reaching out to experts. So we don't feel as though we can do the solicitation work efficiently, at least not on a nationwide basis. We can do kind of a hit and miss here and there. We certainly know enough to be dangerous to walk a client through the sort of initial stages of risk assessment and, where do we need to. So we know a lot about it, but when the client's actually ready to jump, we bring in another expert. And it's fascinating because our expert is a law firm and they are fantastic at what they do. And they charge nowhere near to that dollar amount you just shared. So that's really wild.
These services are not law firms. I think law firms would have a very hard time getting by that ethically.
Yeah.
So these are not law firms. But I think we've hit that over the head. But I guess just to wrap up the state level piece, which is every state is different. Every state has its own, statutory scheme, hopefully. Some don't have much of a nonprofit statutory scheme, but regardless, when your organization gets to the point where you are maybe operating outside the state or fundraising outside the state, talk to someone, a real expert in this, not one of these big.
Yeah. And maybe start with a lawyer.
Registration
not to be self-serving, but start with a lawyer where you're going to get the ethical, fully analyzed version, and then consider whether or not that lawyer is the one who actually does the registration, because there are other options. And we recommend those other options regularly, but go through the analysis with someone really reputable and knowledgeable, hopefully.
Absolutely. So back to kind of your background and your history. You started in private wealth management and high net worth individuals and private foundations. So maybe we can go into a little bit about the big differences between private foundations and public charities. And kind of one reason why I wanted to talk about this is, even new founders who want to start a nonprofit, they don't necessarily know the difference between the two, and they want to use foundation in their name, or they just don't see, it doesn't matter. They both have C3. So what does it matter? So maybe you can chat a little bit about that.
Absolutely. And we see exactly the same thing. And it's really interesting because we see clients and donors and founders, I would say, regularly kind of overcomplicate the issue, because there are complicated nuances to one versus the other. but not the ones that the clients typically want to hit on. So I always explain this as, in the world of charities, in the world of all things 501c3, there are a bunch of different categories, but the two main ones that we see are the two we're talking about: public charities, private foundations. And I think it's most understandable to explain it by analogy, right? A public charity is your broadly supported organization, your United Way, your, similarly situated groups that are getting lots of little contributions from all over the place. Your private foundation is your typical family foundation, your corporate foundation, where the all or most of the money is coming from a central source, right? So one individual, one family, one company, one group of affiliates. And of course, and you know this, but the difference in what that means, at least at the most intrinsic level, is the law, and the IRS takes the view that if there's a lot of people donating, well, then there's a lot of people to pay attention and care and make sure that this organization is doing the things that it is supposed to do with its charitable funds. On the other side of the coin, you have a private foundation where maybe you have one person or one family or one group of related folks, and they're the only ones who know anything, who care at all. So we have a different standard there, right? A much more heavily burdensome, if you will, from a housekeeping perspective, from a rules perspective, totally different regime. So I think that's typically how I explain it. I mean, literally, that's like my client phone call that we just had there.
Right. I have them all the time.
Yes.
So one of the we both do. One of the big things that I feel is a travesty of the 1023 EZ, which is the easy application for tax exempt status, is the checkbox. It's right at the end. And it's like, how do you want to do it? And even the ones I've had some problems with, there is an option on there to check the box, let the IRS decide for me.
I know.
And don't do that.
I know. Well, okay.
Don't let me share.
Can I share an embarrassing story that I shouldn't share, but I will, because I think it will make people feel better, hopefully. So we don't do a lot of easy forms. And we don't fill out very many. We might at best provide like instructions so a client kind of has a step-by-step guide, but we don't walk through this very much. So I chair the TEGE Exempt Organizations Council, the nationwide, all the people who know all of the things around exempt organizations. Well, when we
a group I love.
Yes. And that's how I think originally
Okay,
connected once upon a time, because you were hosting our meetings in California. So
yes.
So when we set up our new council, we were very small initially. We did an easy form, and guess who fell prey to that little thing that they fixed it now, but when you click the right box and then you go down and you click the wrong box and it resets the top box. So we, as the TEG Council, done by the chair, we were a private foundation. We walked through the wonderful process of retroactive fixing due to the inadvertent box checking. So yes, I would agree. If we and the folks who were working with me on it did that, goodness help someone who doesn't actually know the rules, because we did, and we still fell prey to it.
Absolutely. And they keep doing these updates or little changes of the form. And if you're not, which most of the time it's good. So I do appreciate that the service is going in and doing some work on making sure it's a little easier. But that is still one major issue where I think
it's difficult.
That, and I have one right now, a client who formed as an LLC, did the 1023 EZ. And it's like, if we could just actually upload the documents and have just a little, just a little bit of review, it'd be so
well.
So
and it is fascinating because I do appreciate deeply what I think was the initiative, or at least one of the initiatives behind it, which was to make this accessible, make it not necessary for a little bitty, as we affectionately call them, to get up and running without paying thousands of dollars to a lawyer. That's a wonderful goal, and I'm all for it. But I think in some ways it may have at times oversimplified, and it does. It lends itself to error because of the lack of sort of broad knowledge in the individuals who are doing this, as well-intentioned as they may be. And I think it does the same. We see it with lawyers and accountants as well, who kind of dabble in the area, think they know, think it's okay, and they'll walk someone through. And then you want to talk about bad actors. I mean, I'm sure you've seen them as well. We've had a lot of clients who will call us and say, well, we know we don't qualify, but our last lawyer told us we could. And we should just get through anyways, get our letter, and then, we deal with whatever came after. So it's really interesting how it's worked in real life, notwithstanding, I think, the best intentions.
I think at times we're in the wild, wild west here. And you kind of alluded to it, 20 years ago, the IRS had more resources, had much more dedication to EO. And right now, there's just not enough resources in the service to do what they need to do, in my opinion. Yeah. And so it's almost like we're going back to the wild, wild west. Rather
It is. And it makes for such an interesting, this gets a little esoteric, but for us advising in this space, when we really do know what should be done, what is the proper way, what the risks, what the technical risks are, it makes for a really interesting scenario where, obviously we never, and you don't advise on the risk of audit or the risk of exam, but at the same time, we get those questions from the IRS all the time, from clients all the time of, well, but what's the risk? Who's ever going to look at this? And well, that's really not the point. Either you decide to do this properly and in a compliant fashion, or I'm not sure we're going to be the right fit for you. But it's really an unusual situation, because I think we could all list out, some enforcement examples, but by the same token, a whole lot of stuff that probably never got brought to light because of that lack of resources, really.
Well, in my experience, it just takes one whistleblower to the Attorney General that takes it seriously, and then it's a snowball effect. It can start with the state Attorney General and then expand to the Internal Revenue Service.
Absolutely. Well, and gosh, that's a whole nother, the evolution of state regulation is probably a whole nother podcast.
Well, we'll have to schedule that.
Let's follow up on that one.
Okay, so for any of our listeners who went and they legitimately and appropriately, I'll just put it that way, started a private foundation, what are some of the things that you would advise them to consider? So let's say they're still in their newbie stage. 3 to 5 years, I think. What would you kind of advise for those?
Well, so I'll hit the biggest one first. You can't operate as a private foundation without having a pretty decent understanding of where you're going to trigger the insider, I'll call them related party rules. And that's not the technical name, but because of what we talked about earlier and the impetus for IRS and government to oversee the use of funds in lieu of the donors paying attention, there are all of these rules. And I see clients repeatedly, and I know you see the same thing, they struggle with them because the whole point of those rules is to be punitive and to deter. They have nothing to do with fairness or appropriateness or what is best or good intentions. And so I think that's number one. And they're a pain in the rear. That's just the best way. They're there for good reason, but they are difficult to navigate for clients who don't understand them, right? But having an awareness of kind of the certain situations where those can be triggered, and awareness of who the people are or who the entities are with whom you need to be aware, so you don't inadvertently sell an asset to the wrong person, pay the wrong person for the wrong thing, rent an office from the wrong person or to the wrong person. Any of those types of, innocent transactions, right? We've seen them over and over, and where you aren't asking a lawyer before you, take every single little step, there's a real risk of running into not just taxes, but a compliance risk from the perspective of what violation of those rules can trigger. Because you misstep, then you have to fess up, and you have to pay the taxes, and now you've sort of done things that are going to flag you, potentially at the IRS and potentially even at the state level. And you see the inadvertent and often very well-intentioned steps that lead into that. Most of them are not, egregious scenarios. And yet you see the cost that it takes organizations to kind of clean up the mess. So that would be my very long-winded answer to your question of kind of first and foremost, you've got to understand the regulatory environment you're in and how you can end up running into those punitive scenarios.
Right. So, I mean, you have to think about it. Like you said, most of the time, mostly well-intentioned, the rules are there and the punitive pieces are there because of bad actors, like people who should have known better, could have known better, did it anyway. And it's just, like you said, it's the environment you're in now because these are the people who, are in oversight positions.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
Be aware of that.
Exactly. I think if I were to highlight some others, I think the other thing that we see in the private foundation space is kind of a series of misunderstandings around what a foundation can do. And maybe, I'm sure you see this too, putting maybe a little bit more meaning into the phrase and into the classification than is warranted. So things like, well, gosh, we're a private foundation. That means we can't fundraise from the public. No, it doesn't. That's perfectly fine. Or, what is that limit in our activities? Okay, a few things, but not much. You can do most of the same things that a public charity can, with a few limitations. The other one we hear is board representation. Oh, well, if we're, comparing the two, we've got to have a different board for a public charity than a private foundation. No. So there are a lot of misconceptions, and I don't even know where they come from because a lot of them are not at all based in the law. But there are a lot of misconceptions around one classification, one status versus the other.
Well, I think the whole area is confusing. I mean, when you really think about it, so you've got public charity, private foundation, private operating foundation, charitable foundation, like all these different, it's confusing to practitioners.
Type 3 non-functionally integrated in there? No, it does. It gets really wide. No. And it's, it's our world, right? It's our literal day-to-day scenario. But for someone who doesn't live and breathe and, on a momentary basis in that world, it is. It's very confusing. It's confusing why these things are in place. I understand why, but for the layman, it's very confusing and it's really frustrating.
How many years? How many years did it take for us to get up to that? Well, and it's still, you're right. The 509A3 supporting organization rules, the functionally integrated, non-functionally integrated, make my head hurt.
Could you just rip it off right now if you had to? I mean, no, I'd have to go through, no. I'd have a shot at summarizing it, sort of. but you have to refresh because there are so many nuances. And I think, again, we're paid for that. I can accept it under that circumstance, but you see it from the client's perspective. I just had a call with a client this morning, and the genesis of the call was, look, yes, you need to understand all of this, and I appreciate your passion for understanding all the ins and outs, but also at some level, you need to let us worry about the housekeeping, which is what this is, so that you can, let us tell you what we're doing, let us inform you, check the box, nod your head, understand that it's all been taken care of appropriately, and then go focus on the actual philanthropic activity. Because tax classifications and type 3, this, that, and the other, that's not the good work. It's necessary, but it's not the good work that our clients got into this for. So I think that's the thing that we see more often than not is just the client frustration of having to navigate the regulatory environment that has evolved. I think, we do a pretty good job. I know y'all do a good job of helping them navigate through that in a way that allows them to focus on the passion of it all. But it's a navigation process for sure.
I so totally agree. It's a navigation process and a communication process. Don't be scared of talking to your attorney about that next great idea you have, or the next place you plan to rent, or the next employee you plan to hire before you do it. It's the communication has to go both ways, because then we can utilize our knowledge and the roadblocks we've seen and the navigation to help you. It's so much easier to do it if there's a good stream of communication than if I don't hear from a client for a year and then all of a sudden now I have that conversation about all of the things they did over the past year that now we have to wind back and try to change.
Communication. And I do understand it because we charge for our time. And so every question, there's an analysis done of, okay, is this the right thing to do? Is this the appropriate use of these funds in a way that every good steward of philanthropic dollars should be asking that question? But we see it the same as you. Man, that question a year in advance, which may have taken 15 minutes, that would have been easy to answer. But the unwind is pretty shocking. So no, it really is fascinating from that perspective, and it's what we see day in and day out. It's definitely a struggle on the client side.
Absolutely. Okay, as we kind of wrap this up, what other kind of tips, tricks, hacks, whatever you like to call it, would you like to share, if any?
So I think maybe two things that have nothing to do with each other, but the two that jump out where I see the most opportunity for easy education on this topic. One, and I know this will resonate with you, is encouraging clients to find an accounting firm or CPA firm that is entrenched in this area.
Yes,
that is our number one. It is on every first client call. It's on a series of our first client communications, because realistically, we know that the client hesitation around calling the lawyer and incurring the fees will continue. We might luck into a conversation after the initial phases every couple of years, maybe. They're going to be touching base with that accounting firm several times a year, if not more. And that is the person, that is the group that is best situated to say, whoa, what is this check? What is this amount? Where did this income come from? This is a potential problem. We need to get you to the right place. So that would be tip number one. And then the other one, we've talked about kind of education and knowledge and how confusing this environment is. And one of the things that I've seen that I really love, I think it started around 10 or so years ago, the IRS website, while far from perfect, it's got some really good educational, simple, relatively speaking, information. It has, the life cycles where it walks through, and you can kind of click through the steps, whether you have a public charity or a private foundation. It's where we send our new attorneys who are learning. I'm like, no, go walk through it. Walk through the process, walk through the steps, walk through the issues that can come up, walk through the what ifs at the end when you've screwed something up. So that would be the other thing that I would highlight if people are looking to sort of gain some sense of education and maybe a deeper understanding for what your lawyers or accountants are sharing with you. I would point them there, because I think those resources are really fantastic, and the IRS deserves a lot of credit for them.
Absolutely. And, I also say there's a heck of a lot of information out there that isn't correct. But if you're getting it from the IRS website, it's correct. And also the state attorneys general have put a lot of effort into it as well.
Especially
depends on where you are again.
Like, for example, we've got in Texas, our attorney general has a fantastic blurb on a couple particular topics. They've got a great gambling and lottery, all things that. And then there's a couple other state resources, which are our go-tos. We don't even have memos on the topics, because those resources, get it from the mouth, straight, clear, done. So no, there are some really great state resources. You just have to kind of find them on that hit and miss basis.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Danika, for joining us today. It's been really awesome to chat with you. We should do it more often. Yes.
No, this was a lot of fun. Appreciate you having me. And I hope that folks found this helpful and beneficial to shine a little bit more light into a murky area.
I'm sure they will. Thanks again.
Thanks, May.
Thank you for listening to the Nonprofit Counsel Podcast. Are you ready to lead with clarity and confidence? Head to nonprofitcounsel.com to find the tools you need to start smart, lead strong, and create lasting impact.